Also in 1987, you heard some very bad news. You were told that you had cancer. While you fought through and survived, what was your initial reaction when you were told about it?
I think my reaction was probably the same as anybody else's. You kind of think you're going to die, and that pretty much blows. You know, you don't want to think about that. Well, in my case, anyway, I've had it twice now, and both times, and they're different kinds. Both times, it's been taken care of, thank God. But both times, it's also been when I've been very distressed. I think there's a deep, deep, deep connection between your psyche and your physical being. I think the first time that I had cancer in the 80s there was a lot of stress, not from overwork. I don't believe that stress from overwork. I think if you like what you're doing and you're working a lot, that's not going to harm you in the least. In fact, I don't even think we should call that stress. I think stress is when you feel you're losing control and you're unable to do things for yourself, and that's very much how I felt. You know, like my music was sort of leaving where I wanted it to be, and it was being sort of taken away from these really there were some very, very powerful men in my life that were not very pleasant, and so I felt like I was just really sort of abused at that point, and I also think that, you know, people only get abused if they let themselves be abused, so I take full responsibility for that. But I think that that's my body's way of saying, "Oh yeah, you think you don't want to live, or you think you're feeling bad now? Watch this," you know. And so it recurred that the last time I had cancer was another similar situation where I had lost control of my life, and given the power to someone else. And it's just, I can't do that. I realize it's really bad for me to do that. I have to maintain control over my life.
Martha, how much of the experience of battling cancer came with you as you evolved your musical career?
I don't know. I'm a strange person when it comes to, first of all, I can't even call it battling, because I didn't really battle. It was kind of like, you have it, okay. The first time it was like, okay, you'll have an operation. Okay, have an operation. Okay, you don't have it. So that was good. The second time was like, you have it. Okay, we're going to have an operation. Okay, here's a week of radiation. Okay, you're done. So I don't think that's really battling. I know there's people that have suffered for long periods of time. I was not one of those people, luckily. I don't want to, and I'm very glad that I didn't, but I can't say that I was battling. I can say that what emotionally you go through, obviously, and that's going to be different with different people too. And I just kind of like, with all things in life, I try to see out the other end. Even if I'm on a trip, if I'm on tour, and if I start getting sketchy, if the plane is like bumping around a lot or something and I start getting fearful, I just picture myself driving down the driveway of my house. And that's what I always do. I just sort of project into the future where I'm going to be, and hopefully, that calms me down. And I think I do that with music as well. I think musically, I look for something that's going to, not necessarily in music like a happy place, because a lot of my music is very dark, but just a place to go to get sometimes rid of a lot of dark emotions that I have inside me. Because there's no better way to vent than musically. I mean, it really does purge your soul when you are able to take your emotions and bring them out in the form of music. That's why it's such a great communicator, because that's what, when people do it, I think when people do it right, they do it from their gut, with all their soul, and they do it honestly. And I think that's the thing that moves people the most, So if anything has come away from the cancer, it's probably the importance of that honesty, and it's the importance of really communicating, because we all, we're all going to die someday, but when it comes up like that, you kind of like, it makes it a little more important. And so I think that's more than anything what I've taken away from it.
From the 2007 album This by the Motels, Nothing. Martha Davis is my guest on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Martha, I have to ask you, what are the biggest differences in Martha Davis, the songwriter, from 1972, 1987, and into today?
I think more than anything, it's just confidence in myself, because, and as a songwriter, one of the things that happened after I left Capitol was I basically gave my muse, I said, you know what, we're not just the Motels, so you don't have to just come up with pop songs anymore. You can do whatever you want. I just told the muse that they were free to go wherever they wanted to go. So all of a sudden, a lot of different kinds of music started coming out of me. I mean, I've written country and western, jazz, a couple of kids' albums, which I'm going to actually get out very soon, I think, finally. Musicals. I wrote a musical with my son-in-law called Smith that we're maybe thinking about turning into a radio show. It's about the Joseph Smith, who founded the Mormon religion. And with everything that I do that's more unique or challenging, I get more confidence. So what's happened to Martha now is she is not afraid to come up with the decisions or produce things or play things. I'll basically play anything other than drums. I'm just pretty bad at drums. I'll do some percussion, but drums not really. But everything else, keyboards, bass. On this album, a couple of the bass lines and stuff on The Day That Won't Go Away, which is a good song, and I'm Better Now is my stuff. So, and even sometimes if I can't literally play it perfectly, I have no problem coming up with the idea and showing it to people. So it's just confidence, just feeling good about myself and feeling that I'm able to do this, every aspect of this job that I love.
Of all the songs from the early Motels era through today, what were a couple of your personal favorites and why?
The problem with my favorite songs is they're always the next one I'm going to write. That's the problem with it. My favorite song is always the last one I've written. And I was just thinking what was the last thing I've written, and I was actually starting to write one this morning called I Slipped and Fell in Love, but it sounds like a jazz standard, but because my girlfriend just did that. She just slipped and fell in love, and I said, your songs are like your children, and it's like people that have more than one child know that they love their children, but not all the same way. You love them equally, but not all in the same way. So you have different kind of, I mean, there's a place in my heart completely for Only the Lonely, which just appeared on my guitar one day. I mean, I picked up the guitar and the whole song was basically written, and it just sort of fell out. And when they happen like that, Suddenly Last Summer is another one that woke me up in the middle of the night, that little riff, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So it's, those are really, always good. Celia from the first album, I was always, that has the F word in it before everyone was using the F word in songs. And it was actually a line that my first husband, told me, which is, I am not going to kill you, I'm just going to blank up your pretty face. I'm like, ah. So, I mean, they resonate for different reasons, as you can imagine. But it's, I don't know. I love them all equally, and I know some aren't even very good. I mean, and I still love them. They're like my children.
Now, on Only the Lonely, I read somewhere that you actually apologized to Roy Orbison about the title. Yes.
Knowing full well that you can't copyright a title. I mean, I knew that before I did it, but I'm like, he was at the studio at Record One, and oh man, he also was a great influence on me from when I was very young, because I used to love those songs, and his voice just, I got to actually see Roy Orbison at the Roxy in Los Angeles before he died, and that voice just, brought tears to my eyes. So beautiful, so wonderful. So yes, I went up to him and I said, I'm sorry, I know I sort of took your title. He goes, no, that's all right, Martha. I like your song a lot. So it was very sweet.
Martha Davis is here with me on Revenge of the 80s Radio. Now let's talk about some of your new music, and you have several new CDs you put out in the last couple of years. I want to start out with one of them. I understand that Beautiful Life, a solo project, is strongly influenced by your own life.
Yeah, it started out, the Beautiful Life album started out to be just another collection of songs with one track that was called Beautiful Life. And it actually, that album has been recorded and mixed and probably will come out someday. But then I got a new engineer in the house, and we started working on that album a little more. He sort of started remixing a couple of the tracks, and one thing led to another, and the album started developing more conceptually, and the Beautiful Life concept, which the original song was about giving yourself away to try to please other people, like doing things to make other people happy while turning the back on your own personal desires, which is what I think killed my mother, who wanted to be an author. She wanted to be the next Virginia Woolf. She was a brilliant literary major, but this was the 40s and 50s, and she was told by my dad that you have to settle down and be a wife, and you have to be a mother, and you have to this and that and the other thing. So they first of all, they tried for 11 years to have a child and couldn't have one, and then they adopted my sister, and then 10 months later I was born. So the relationship by that time wasn't getting better, and we had a pretty rocky childhood. It was pretty much a mess. But she was desperately unhappy because she'd not done the things that she wanted to do. It's not she didn't love being a mom and stuff like that, but she had this other part of her that she wanted to do. And I didn't find this out until after she died, and I found her diary that I never knew she had, and in it she talks about this, and she talks about her wanting to do that, and how my father would always tell her to just, Jane, have you lost your mind completely, and then make her, he didn't like her friends, he didn't like, so and she went along with it, and that's, it was a sad story, and she ended up killing herself. As I'm writing this thing, as it becomes more and more involved in her story, I realize too that I am in a relationship at the end stages of what was once a wonderful relationship, but my husband and I had grown far, far apart, and the dynamic of our relationship seemed to be mirroring that of my mother and father's. In other words, I'm sitting here writing this album about my mom and dad and realizing that I'm living that relationship, as we often do. We oftentimes turn into our parents. Why, I don't know. But so the album is a very dark album, and it was really hard making that album. It involved a lot of, just really dark, deep feelings. But several people who have known me for many, many years say this is the album we've always waited for from you. So I don't know. I have actually sort of pulled it from rotation because I'm working on a presentation of it that's a little bit more elaborate than just plopping it on the internet like we did originally. So, but that's the story of Beautiful Life. It's called Beautiful Life, A Slight Miscalculation.
You're pulling it now to re-release it more as your magnum opus, I suppose, right?
Well, it's very personal, and it does mean a lot to me. And I think just, when at the time I did release it, I was so scatterbrained because of all the things that, I was going through then. It was just kind of like, yeah, whatever, okay, 3 for $25, or $10 a piece, or 3 for $25. Probably should. I got so much grief from, especially my son-in-law. It's just like, God, how could you do that to this album? It's the best thing you've ever done. But,
We'll make sure that people who are listening now know when it comes out, and you'll be able to find more about that by reading our website, revengeofthe80sradio.com. We'll try to keep you up to date. And, of course, Martha Davis, your website is themotels.com. Mm-hmm. So you can find out more about what's going on there.